Welcome to Mintel's Little Conversation podcast.
Welcome to Mintel's Little Conversation, where our experts bring you fresh ideas and new perspectives on how consumers eat, drink, shop, groom and think. I'm Edward Bergen, global food and drink analyst, an all-round foodie, and I'm a massive hummus fanatic. And as always, I like to mention the hummus, but actually maybe it's more relevant today than usual, as it qualifies as one of my vices, which might give you a clue as to what today's topic is going to be about. Give me some freshly baked warm pitta, some hummus with a bit of premium olive oil, and I am one happy boy. And that's today's topic. So there are many things that we human beings do, whether it's eating, drinking, smoking, taking things, playing games of some sort that maybe the governments or the world or my parents might say are bad for us. And, you know, some of those categories like alcohol, chocolate, gambling, violent gaming, we might call these vices. So I thought what we'd do is we'd discuss, are these things bad or are they good, or somewhere in between? And I've brought the best experts together from Mintel to do it, who talk about these categories. So do you want to introduce yourselves?
Yes. Hi, I'm Bad Boy John Polking. I am a gaming analyst here in the US, so I primarily focus on video games, but I also do some work in the leisure space, primarily for the relevance of this podcast in gambling.
And I'm Marcia Mogolansky. I'm the Director of Insight for Mintel Food and Drink. I am not a bad girl, but I love chocolate. So that's really where I spend my time in the sweet categories of Mintel Food and Drink.
And I am Johnny Forsyth, and I've been a Mintel veteran now. I've been here for 14 years, and the majority of that I've spent analysing alcohol. And Ed, I think there might be a sideline in alcoholic hummus. Maybe we should discuss that offline.
Well, they tried sweet hummus, and it was, not a fan, funnily enough.
I've also looked at coffee, which, many people might not consider a vice, but it is the biggest legal psychoactive drug. And I've even toyed with looking at CBD as well, and answered a few client queries on that. So hopefully I'm quite well qualified for this conversation.
Well, we're covering quite a few topics. I actually want to start with a non-food topic, because I think for the rest of us here who are in the same team, this might be quite an interesting way to start. So we're going to start with the gambling and I guess the violent gaming space, but maybe gaming in general. Why are these categories, these things, given such a bad press?
Because parents just don't understand, in short. No, I think that it really did start when video games became more realistic, and then they became, as a result, with, there wanting to be action in these video games, they turned a little violent. Started all the way back with Mortal Kombat, and, you could rip somebody's head out from their spine, and everyone was like, this is going to ruin America's youth. But, I think that there was a lot of pressure put on video games in particular because people didn't understand what it was like to actually play them. You see, highlights and clips of things that could be perceived as horrifying, but for the people that are playing them, it's just, part of the overall entertainment and the experience. It's interesting to see how, kind of outside perceptions of video games have shaped what the video game world looks like without actually talking to the people that are playing those games. And then from the gambling side, again, it's these stories of losing all your money in Las Vegas, and it's all this sort of negative press that comes from people that see the bad sides, because the bad sides make good headlines. If I'm going to be frank, I mean, obviously there are some bad sides, but, people are, at least in the US, they gamble much more to have fun than they do to actually try to make money. It's almost seen as, paying a ticket for a movie or something like that.
And consumers get that. They understand. They actually know that they are gambling. Like they say, I'm gambling for fun. I know I'm going to lose.
Yeah, at least in the U.S., consumers are 5 times as likely to say they play or they gamble for fun than they are for profit. So exclusively, and the profit could be a fun little aside, but I think that especially for that industry, there are certainly some people that, get sucked into the rabbit hole of, well, if I just do this one more time. But I think that for the most part, it's seen as a source of entertainment more than a potential for revenue generation.
So there are some quite nice links. You just said there are going to be some that get addicted and play once more. And that actually moves us really nicely into the other guys. I don't know if Marcia, you want to jump in around the same thing, this idea of chocolate. Is it bad? And it gets that bad press because it's, what the calories, the sugar that we have.
Well, chocolate has actually tried to put itself into the good press with all the antioxidants and other benefits that have been found in chocolate. But yes, chocolate as your major food source would not be good for you. Chocolate as an indulgence and something you eat every once in a while is probably no worse for you than playing the occasional video game. It's just something you do for fun and pleasure. It doesn't mean that you are addicted to it. It doesn't mean that you are bad for doing it. A lot of people will actually cut back on the amount of chocolate they're eating in order to stay healthier. And in fact, they'd much rather have a full chocolate experience, even if it's only a small bite, than a transformed experience where they've taken out all the things that you look forward to, like the fat and the sugar and all that sort of stuff. They'd much rather have a full head-on chocolate small experience. So does that make them addictive? Does that make them chocolate addicts? Does that mean chocolate's bad for you? Of course, chocolate and moderation are the way you have to look at it, similarly to what John said about gaming in moderation.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of moralizing about, what's good and bad. And anything that is seen as unhealthy is seen as particularly sinful. I think anything that's seen as a bit too escapist as well is seen as quite sinful. So I think with alcohol, that falls into that category. There's also a behavioural issue with alcohol, that it can make certain people behave a bit more aggressively. But I think, are they bad? Well, yeah, alcohol is a toxin. It's not ever going to be good for you. But I think a lot of people would tell you that the joy and the escape and the sense of community that they get through drinking is probably just, if not more healthy, certainly for their mental health, than the badness in terms of having toxins in your system.
I want to challenge you on each of this moderation topic, because at the moment, and you can fight me if you like, we have a problem where in each case we've got arguments throughout, especially lockdown, that kids have, because they've stayed inside, they've basically just played game. They've gamed all hours. They've not been at school, many of them. You've had people probably saying they've eaten more sweet treats than ever in some markets because of this last period, and we've got obesity crises being announced throughout the world. We've got, in some cases, whether they're eating they're not eating in restaurants and food service, they might be drinking or more at home, and therefore the alcohol consumption at home in some cases has gone up. You might correct me, but what I'm saying is here that actually consumers don't know what moderation is, and actually they've gone too far in most cases. They think it's okay to have some of this stuff, but I just want to challenge you on that, because I think consumers have lost control in some cases.
Well, I'll start there. Consumers have lost control of their entire life during COVID-19. No one has any control. That's an aside to that comment. As for sweet treats and obesity and all that sort of stuff, obesity is linked to, in part, too much sugar. But the too much sugar isn't necessarily coming from the occasional sweet treat. It's coming from a lot of other categories like carbonated beverages, which are absolutely loaded with sugar. I think that they may be eating more sweet treats in some markets, and you may have the data to back that up, Ed, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's where the obesity is coming from. It's not cause and effect. Just because you eat a couple more pieces of chocolate, that's not why you've suddenly gotten as big as the Eiffel Tower. There's a lot more that contributes to it than just sweet treats. And I still hold out the fact that sweet treats help with your mental health and making you feel good about yourself and making you feel comfortable in what is an especially bizarre time.
I also think, people want to lose control. I think it's quite healthy to lose control. Obviously, if you lose too much control, that's not a good thing. But our society kind of demands control, and it's very pressurized. So I think a lot of people look to vices as just a way to just get rid of that. And I think that there's fundamentally something very, very healthy about doing that, as long as you don't do it too much. And if you look in terms of alcohol, if you look at drugs, humans and all human societies have consumed alcohol and drugs for thousands and thousands of years. This is very much part of the human condition to need to do this.
Yeah, there's a certain element of catharsis, to Johnny's points. And I think that sort of emotional release is important for people when they are cooped up in the way that we all feel sometimes, whether that is, betting on a team to win and they win, or whether that is just completing a level in Candy Crush. There's something about that sort of success and release, even if it's, momentary, that can be, I think, helpful for people in the long run. I mean, not to bring it to too dark of a place, but it gives people hope. And it gives people, a little bit of a glimmer of joy in times when they don't necessarily, see what's going to be, a month ahead, let alone, 5 minutes ahead.
Yeah, just to add on to John's point, and I agree with everything that you said, I think what's really interesting is that during lockdown, apart from markets like UK and US, what we've seen around the world is that most consumers have actually been drinking less alcohol than they were before. And I think that's really, really interesting, because you'd think the one time that you'd want to reach for a glass of whiskey would be while you're locked down and you're desperately in need for some kind of catharsis and escapism. So I think what that tells me is that your point, Ed, that you made about people having lost control is actually not true, because people are very conscious of their health, and increasingly over the last few years they've thought, maybe I am drinking a bit too much. So I would argue that people are in more control than you would necessarily think.
So we've talked about control, we've talked about moderation, we touched on community. Johnny referenced it a second ago, but I reckon with gaming and gambling, maybe more gaming, community has been one of the most wonderful things that's come out of this industry, you could call it.
It's arguably, one of the greatest things that is, true about video gaming is that it brings people together through this common interest, and it allows their passions to run rampant and be reinforced in places that people didn't necessarily feel welcome. I mean, a lot has changed in the last, 20 years, just in terms of pop culture, where now nerd culture is pop culture, and passions are, reinforced, and people can sort of find their tribe wherever that may be. And a lot of that has come, through the rise of online communities, whereas, if only, one person played Magic the Gathering in their high school, they would feel like an outcast. But now that, there's hundreds of thousands of fans of Magic the Gathering that you can find online, that makes it feel much more welcoming. It's really boosted people's self-esteem, and it has created some sort of, harmony, because everyone's a little bit weird, and we all know that. And at least we have a little bit of a better idea of that now than we might have a couple decades ago.
And Ed, you've done a lot of work on social isolation and what a big problem that is in modern society, particularly in the digital era as well. And it's a massive problem in terms of mental health, particularly amongst the younger generation and the Gen Zs. And I think things like gaming, but also things like alcohol. Alcohol is fantastically socially cohesive in terms of giving people a reason to get together and being something that they can bond over. And, you know, I know that I probably wouldn't have met my wife without alcohol. So, you know, it's a really important social lubricant, if you like, particularly in the UK, where we tend to, you know, lack a certain amount of, certainly be a bit more reserved as a culture.
I found out my wife liked me because of alcohol, and I wasn't the one drinking.
Exactly.
She's going to kill me for saying that on the podcast. But it is true. So into community. Now, before we get on to some of the cool brand stories, where did in any of these trends, there is obviously an extreme. And before we talk about brands, what roles do brands need to play to just kind of sort out some of the extremes of each of these vices? Do they have a role to play? Marcia, you started talking about each of these extremes. That it's been an ancient thing that we've been talking about, the vices and what they are. But what do brands need to do to manage it?
Well, going back to your extremes, I mean, of course, vices have been around forever, since forever. Dante talked about his 7 vices, and that included gluttony. So that means that overeating and over drinking are 2 extremes and 2 vices that we have to be cautious of. So brands, if they're trying to help reduce our dependence or our overeating and over drinking, make it easy for us to have access to less, which sounds very strange. It doesn't mean it has to cost less or be less. It just has to be in a smaller package. And that's something we talk about a lot, is that one thing that's come up a lot in surveys we do on chocolate, where consumers, especially in the UK and the US, will say, I would rather have a small piece of a full fat, full sugar chocolate than a huge amount of bad tasting stuff. So that's one way to cut back on this sense of gluttony, is by making it special but small, delicious, and you could say perhaps addictive, because it's so good, but you're only eating a very small amount. So it's balancing the amount of something and the quality of something.
It's interesting as well. There was, I don't want to kind of rush too quickly into the brand examples, but I thought it was a really interesting campaign by Heineken beer, where they essentially had a campaign for their 0.0% lager, where they used James Bond, and you associate James Bond, you know, with quite strong cocktails and martinis, and you know, suddenly he was fronting this campaign for non-alcoholic beer, and I just thought that was really responsible in terms of, you know, saying that it's now cool to be moderate, and really trying to change that narrative.
You got any other stories? I think it's a good shoe-in. Where any of the stories on from your other industries? John and Marcia. John, you want to go first, where they've balanced that? There is a bad press, and how have they balanced that out with actually there are some great tickets that come out of it?
Yeah, I think some categories especially work well with the gaming world in terms of, you know, the competition and the adrenaline. I mean, that's why we see a lot of energy drinks and candies and kind of quick hits going into the video game world, because there's lots of little bits of energy boost that you can get from some of these categories that Marcia and Johnny cover. But a lot of the new opportunities that we've seen have kind of come from games that sort of break that perception of, you know, everyone's just going to be shooting each other for however long, because video games aren't just that anymore. So a game like Animal Crossing New Horizons, which came out earlier this year, which came out in March, you know, right at the beginning of the pandemic, and was, you know, treated as, you know, this kind of hammock on for, you know, life's garbage fire that we were all kind of experiencing a few months ago, because it's a game where you just kind of live on an island and there's nothing really violent or bad about it. You're just interacting and bartering and digging and exploring. And so we saw a lot of brands that were working within that game, you know, and then it's anything from, you know, food and drink brands to something like sports teams. One of my favorite examples that I saw was, you know, the Detroit Lions, an NFL team here in the U.S., announced their upcoming season, their schedule of who they were playing through Animal Crossing. And so it was very playful, and you had people hitting a person with a cheese head on the head with a goofy little hammer, and it's like, oh, this is when we're playing the Green Bay Packers. It's something like that really plays against the stereotypes of what gaming can be. I think that sort of elevates some of these new entry brands by recognizing that this is something that people regularly interact with, but doesn't necessarily encourage the things that can make it feel dangerous to people from the outside.
I love that.
In chocolate, one thing that we have seen for quite a while was the sense that you can reward yourself with a little bit of pleasure. You don't have to have a ginormous amount of chocolate. Lindt Lindor Truffle Balls was probably about the first premium chocolate company to do this, where in the US at the checkout line, there would be these little Lindt chocolate truffle balls, 3 for $1, 3 of them for $1. And the whole premise was, you've survived grocery shopping, you deserve a little reward. It doesn't mean you're going to stop and buy a huge bar of chocolate. All you need is this one little delicious truffle ball, and that kind of permeated the advertising for quite a while. A lot of brands, Dove did it as well. One little piece of an exquisite chocolate was self-rewarding enough that it did not become an addiction. It was something special and discreet. It was just one little thing. Godiva is doing it right now. They've got a new chocolate bar that is in what looks like a regular tablet, are 4 individually wrapped tablets. If you imagine a Kit Kat, the shape of those 4 Kit Kat bars, those 4 Kit Kat batons, each one of those in the Godiva bar is again subdivided into squares. So you have complete control over your addiction, your demand for chocolate, your desire for just a little bit of something to reward yourself, something good. So that's to me a perfect brand example of balancing what could potentially be an addiction, I'm going to eat the whole bar, to just rewarding myself and making myself feel good. I'm going to have 1 square.
I'd like to talk about a slightly different example, but I find it really, really interesting, of an alcohol brand which really plays on that whole rebellion of drinking. And there's a Scottish craft brewer called Brewdog, who in 2009 launched a really, really strong beer. So it was 18% ABV, or in the US that's 36% proof. It's a really, really strong beer. And it got a complaint from one member of the public who complained to the Advertising Association, or the regulators, and said, this is really irresponsible, and this product should be pulled. And it turned out that the complainant was the founder of Brewdog, who had complained about his own beer. And the reason he'd done that was to create a firestorm of publicity. And in the end, the beer got pulled. And then a couple of years later, Brewdog launched a 1.1% ABV beer by the name of Nanny State. So I just thought it was a really, really interesting example of just messing around with that whole concept of rebellion and government intervention.
Talk about bad boys. My goodness.
But they really are. They're the bad boys of beer, yeah.
That's brilliant. They've done an alcohol-free then. They've gone completely alcohol-free, haven't they?
Yeah, Nanny State is now, so it started life off as a 1.1%, but it's now, they're a very well-regarded non-alcoholic beer.
Brilliant. So we've covered lots of lovely things. We've covered community, we've covered moderation, we've covered moments of pleasure. We've got into how we've changed, I guess, certain cultures. What I loved is getting into from nerd culture, mixing with jock culture, see my Americanisms, to launch an American football team on a game. Like, you would never have heard of that 15 years ago on American high school television. Would never have seen that. So there's lots of positives. But we've got to finish by talking about all the bad things. I know we can't say this in America, but in the UK, the naughty things that we do. I know you dreaded me saying it.
You can say it. It just...
Yeah, really. But you just should.
When John
can say it, but just don't say it.
John blushes. So each of you must have vices. I'll let you wait to hear one of mine, because I keep getting in trouble for it at the moment. But if you want to go back in the same order that we introduced, what are your vices?
For me, it's terrible movies. They will always be my... I would say guilty pleasure, but it's not. I am flaunt it proudly. Anything, for example, the movie The Room is a movie I have seen more than probably any other movie. I've seen it about 50 times. And it is something I always go back to. It brings me such joy, as any sort of schlock is, brings a tear to my eye. I love it.
I've seen The Room.
The best.
Once. Never again.
I can't disagree with you more.
And before these two come to blows, I can add in my vice. I say this with a certain amount of pride, and shame. It's following the antics of the royal family, and poor Johnny knows about this, but I am addicted to Harry and Meghan and Kate and Will.
Wow.
So I admit it here.
Wow.
I think my voice, apart from... Sorry.
Ed looks so shocked.
I think he's just horrified.
You're an archaeologist and an ancient historian, and okay, everyone has their vices.
This is history.
Archaeologist, ancient historian, mother of two, owner of a dog, and I like to follow the royal family. You want to make something of it?
You say history happening, we say tit-tat.
What's your vice, Johnny?
My vice, apart from the fact that I accidentally let my son play violent video games during work Christmas parties, it can be summed up in 2 words: Jaffa Cakes. I have been consuming Jaffa Cakes, a popular UK biscuit, at a rate of knots since lockdown started. I can't stop. I need help. There is very little moderation in terms of Jaffa Cakes in my life at the moment.
I'm going to have to do an intervention.
I think you'll need to.
John doesn't know what Jaffa Cake is, does he?
I have no idea what a Jaffa Cake
John,
is.
I'm going to say, I would send you Jaffa Cake, but I don't want to start a horrible addiction. Your side of the
It's true.
Describe a Jaffa Cake. You've got to describe your vice quickly.
Jaffa Cake is a beautifully sort of a combination of crispy biscuit and this kind of jelly chocolate, which is just delicious.
I don't know if you noticed, but I leaned in a little bit more as you said that.
So I've got a vice. I keep getting told off about it at the moment. I'm playing a mobile game. It's called Raid Shadow Legends, and it is a game where you build a load of different champion characters, fantasy characters with swords and magic and all sorts of things, and you just beat levels and grind through levels to make your champions better. I'm part of a clan. And I'm trying to just get, be a end gamer to get to the end and be really, really good at all the different levels and get new champions and so on. The reason I'm getting trouble is because it has an auto mode. You can basically let it play by itself when you want to grind, and apparently it's on most of the evenings, because I'm working in the day and I play in the evening, and I keep getting told off, and my wife keeps saying, this game is always on, turn it off. So that's my current vice.
Be honest, Ed, do you eat hummus while you play it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And probably
that's his addiction.
And
I complete addiction.
And Lindor balls as well. I'm a big fan of talking about those.
It's all coming out now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we're going to know all about you, all your vices.
All the vices. This was a vice-filled pod with some lovely positive things. So I want each of you to name the one thing that you think is great about each vice. One word. John?
Community.
Marcia?
Security.
Johnny?
Catharsis.
And I guess my one is happiness as a way to finish, because that's the aim of each of them. But it's a terrible way to end it, isn't it? Look, firstly, thank you very much to all of you. This is actually, I think this is going to be one of the last few pods of Series 2 of Mintel's Little Conversation. So we're going to be doing a Series 3 in the short terms. So people will be waiting for that one. But thank you. And to our listeners, thank you for listening. Please subscribe, please rate, review, and find us on all the platforms that you can get podcasts from. We're on Apple and SoundCloud and Spotify and so on. Check out Mintel's website, mintel.com, if you want to find out more about us, or LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. There's always lovely webinars and other things that each of these experts are going to be involved in regularly. Otherwise, enjoy your vices, indulge well, moderate yourselves, and have a fabulous rest of the day. Thank you very much for listening to Mintel's Little Conversation.